Hi, I'm Joan Newcomb, and today is a sit and talk, I guess. I have a sleeping baby and a cat that may protest while I'm sitting here waiting for the ferry. Today's weekly musings is about the difference between following divine guidance and using your own intuition, which could be free will. Now, using your intuition could be considered following divine guidance. The other thing that occurs to me is that we are divine, whether we're using divine guidance or our own intuition or our free will. When we're operating as consciousness, we're navigating our lives from a higher level than we may normally or habitually navigate. If you just look around you and you also look at the way that you've navigated your life in the past, maybe with less awareness, when we're operating at like a lower level, somebody described it as a lower power instead of a higher power. When we're operating from a lower level, that's when we're besieged by our monkey mind, our stinking thinking. We're at the mercy of our gremlin voices. But when we operate as consciousness and navigate as consciousness, then we're operating from a higher perspective. Honestly, it helps make life a lot more easy and effortless. In fact, I have found that it doesn't matter how painful or challenging the circumstances are, when I can operate as my higher self, as consciousness, it just makes it easier to get through. So I've shared for several months that we're in the middle of a move, and I think our original date to leave was supposed to be in May. Our landlady was selling the house and gave us like a 90-day notice, and that was going to be May. So we were moving into my son's house, which had had a flood while they were in the hospital having a baby. Anyway, repainting the house was supposed to be done in April, early April, and new flooring was supposed to be put down too, because all the floors were destroyed. And it's now July, and I think they finished the painting yesterday. And the gift of this is that the person who was going to buy our landlady's house backed out, and so she hasn't found new buyers yet, which has extended our departure date. But we have to be out this month because next month, August 30th, we're flying to Spain to visit with my son who lives there and my grandson who I miss terribly. And his wife is pregnant again. She's due October 1st. So we're going for the first 2 weeks in September. So we're not there during the whole birth, which could be lots of things. I'm also wanting my son and his girlfriend and sleeping baby to get a sense of being in Spain, because my husband and I had planned to retire there this year. Consciousness had other plans. I think that it would be a good idea for them to move to Spain as well. It would be just a better environment. There's a lot of chaos and other things going on for them that if they're completely removed from the circumstances here, it'll give them kind of a reprieve and a reset, at least, for a year. You can get them visas for a year. Now that's my plan. And so how does this have to do with navigating? I had some certainty about navigation, and I knew exactly the timing for my husband and I. We were going to apply for our visas in March and be moving now. And instead, this baby came along, and she was born early too. And it reset the whole timeline. So I still have an intention of getting there. And I realized that, you can't change, fix, or manipulate the external hologram. You can't change, fix, or manipulate anybody else's timeline. I can only really influence my own timeline. However, if I think about it, everybody who's in my storyline is a creation of my consciousness, just as me being in their storyline is a creation of their consciousness. This helped me back in the day when I was doing readings. I had kind of a B job where I was doing readings for like a psychic phone service, and it was new for me. I was used to like sitting down and doing 1 hour readings with a very specific format, seeing the person in front of me. And I had to suddenly adapt to getting random phone calls and tuning into the person instantaneously. And I got very nervous because my original training also said, don't foretell the future, don't give people advice, and all these other things. And besides learning how to instantaneously tune into that person through the sound of their voice, I also learned how to foretell the future, doing a timeline out. And I realized that they created me to give them information. Whatever I said to them was actually a creation of their consciousness. Where was I going with this? So this has to do with navigating my timeline with all these people who are in my timeline right now. And everybody has free will. Everybody is consciousness creating their reality. This little baby is creating her reality. She loves stomping her feet, so I just think she's going to be a flamenco dancer. So she's a double Sag. We have to go to Spain. Right now I have to focus on a whole ton of things in terms of this move. And then right after that, in August, I need to focus on a whole ton of things on getting everybody to Spain. Got the tickets, got the Airbnb, money, all that kind of thing. But it's more like they've never traveled internationally before. So I have to be really on top of, besides we all have passports, getting through TSA together and things like that. But if I can stay centered in myself and pay attention to myself and my own navigation, it makes it a lot more easy because I'm operating from my own clarity. I'm not tuning into other people's anxiety. I suddenly don't feel like, I've never done this before. When my first international flight was when I was 9 weeks old. Flew from Berlin to Washington, D.C. to Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's in my blood. All of these things, if I reflect this back to you, something for you to consider how you're navigating your life. And you can notice whether or not you're operating as your own consciousness, navigating as your own consciousness, or are you navigating as your body personality? Are you experiencing a lot of different realities? If you have children, you could be concerned for them, and suddenly that influences you. If your family member has an illness, you could be concerned for them, and suddenly your navigation feels a little wonky because you're driving with a lot of spare tires. And if you're responsible for anyone else, because I'm caretaking 5 people, I'm still care managing my brother and sister-in-law in New York, long distance, but I have to coordinate things long distance, set up doctor's appointments as telemeds because nobody there drives, things like that. How to do this is stay centered as your higher consciousness. Notice if you're feeling that way. If you're not, there's a couple of different things you can do. I have a free sample of a consciousness technique that you can look at that's below this video. It's called the Skybox technique. And it's a way of having a viewpoint. It's like a drone's eye view of your life and gives you greater clarity on what's going on in the environment. It's totally different than if you're down on the playing field getting tackled as opposed to being in the Goodyear blimp. So that's one thing. But the other thing is to center within and just imagine having consciousness points in key areas. So I think of a little dot of consciousness in the center of my head, a little dot of consciousness in my heart, in my solar plexus, and in my pelvis area. When I awaken with all of those, collapse the wave with all of those, it gives me instant clarity. Actually relieves a lot of pains, helps align things, and brings in things into focus so that I'm navigating with greater clarity. I'm accessing my own higher information. There is a lot of fear and panic in the world today. And I'll have to say, for the most part, that folks who are clinging to the old way of being and the old paradigms of power, the pyramid of power, the power outside, and they're desperately clinging to that, even as that reality has already dissolved. Each of us is in touch with our own inner power. And in that inner power, we're empowered. So we're in touch with our own empowerment and attuned to the collective. We are all connected as consciousness. And so we're empowered. And as a collective, we're infinitely powerful. And that's why authoritarianism, the trickle down kind of power, the old paradigms of power, wealth, education, status, and all that kind of stuff doesn't work anymore, doesn't exist anymore. Each of us is an infinite being with our own infinite awareness. We're all connected as greater consciousness. We have all the information in the cosmic internet. But what we're experiencing is the death rattle, in a sense, this yelling, temper tantrum, screaming of the old paradigm of power that is desperately trying to create death and destruction, put people into fear. And in this country that I'm speaking from, and the administration I'm speaking from, has already been very successful at creating death and destruction and fear. However, a way of looking at it is what is being destroyed can be rebuilt in a way that is better than it was before. Because even though the founding fathers had some very good ideas, the ideas then have been improved upon in the decades and centuries since. We're in a whole new ballgame now. And there were things they hadn't even considered that we now know. So the reality, the rule of law and things can be rewritten to allow for greater equality, greater equanimity, and really greater power to the people than there was before. So just know that authoritarian powers never last. They always crumble. And in fact, part of the reason why they're freaking out is because the way they have set things up, the only way they get out of power is by going to jail or being assassinated. And that's them setting up the reality of not a peaceful transfer of power. I feel like I've gone on much longer than my original intention. The creating your reality as consciousness versus creating as personality, being aligned as your own divinity is another way of looking at it. So I suggest try that this week and see what happens. And if you do it, leave me a comment below because I love to read your comments. And if you like these videos, please share them with your family and friends and on your social media. And please like, follow, click the heart button, subscribe. All these things help get this information out far and wide and to someone who really needs to see this information. And if you want to know more, my website is joan-newcomb.com, and look below for the free offer. And if you want to know more, my website is joan-newcomb.com, and I'll see you next week in another weekly news.